Welcome to Live Into Your Best Life, a show where people learn how to go from where they are to where they'd like to be in any area of life. If you're looking for a new job, wanting to improve your relationships, or even reclaim your health, Skaya will share with you a simple formula that can take you on a journey to begin to live into your best life in all areas of life. Now sit back and begin your journey.
Hi there, and welcome to Live Into Your Best Life. I'm Skaya, your show's host, and today I have a very special guest with me. It's Kokal, and she's my sister. Of all the people in the world that, let's just say, are still alive, I've known her the longest. That means I have a lot of fun stories, a little bit of dirt, and a lot of pride. So, with that, let me give you a little lowdown why I have Crystal on the show. I think this will help her too. So my sister, I'm going to cry. First of all, thanks for being here.
You're welcome.
So
it's my honor to be here.
When we were kids, I didn't have a whole lot of friends, but I had my sister. And sometimes to her chagrin, I was the one that was always there. But we played and we had a lot of fun. And as I've shared in previous shows, some of what we get really good at as adults are things that we practiced as kids. And so a few of the things my sister's really great at is, and we're going to talk about this, is she's good at coming up with plans for fun. And so she was a travel agent and went to school for travel. And she's going to tell us about why did she choose that. We practiced playing house. And she has two amazing sons. One of them has had some extra challenges. He's brilliant and had to navigate systems in a way that not everybody is used to. And so he has done some amazing things, and she's supported that. The other nephew, her other son, has had challenges from the medical realm. He is also amazing, and she's helped him overcome what could have been obstacles to stunt his ability. Instead, he thrives. So we're going to talk a little bit about that momness that she has. And then the other piece of playing house, we had a mom that had us in the kitchen with her all the time. And my sister has taken that gift and love of creating and baking and bringing joy to other people's lives and created her own business. And so that's why I'm having you on the show. How's that sound?
That sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. So tell the folks, when you were a kid, we grew up on the farm and there wasn't a whole lot to do. We had each other and we made each other nuts. Stay on your side of the seat. There was a whole back seat and the things that sisters do. But just give the listeners an insight on how it felt to grow up on the farm in the middle of nowhere with just the four of us.
I would say, I think we had a magical childhood in the sense of we didn't have a lot of outside noise from other people.
Yeah.
We had to focus on each other because we were all we had. We came from a really large extended family, but they weren't anywhere near us. We might get to hear about them every once in a while, and we might get to see them every 10 or 15 years, but they just weren't a part of our everyday life. We had each other. And when it came for holidays, we had each other. It was always just the four of us. And I value that. It helped me to put that same value into my own family, making sure that when we do stuff with extended family, which is great, but then we always come back to just that core group at some point to make that connection. I just felt it was so strong as a child that I wanted to give that to my boys as well. And I hope that as they go on with their lives, that they do the same thing with their immediate families, if and when that time comes.
And I just want to pause there. So the funny thing, as we've grown up and staying connected with some of our cousins, I've been told, we were so jealous of you. You guys got to be away and you got to live where nobody bothered you. So it's,
yeah, for sure.
we were away, we weren't in the middle of it. I always listened to the kids in school, and so many of them had so much family in the area that it was, wow. And we have the family Dad chose for us, right?
Yes.
And
Yep.
so it's interesting talking to our cousins as adults, and that flip of they wish they'd had what we had growing up.
Yeah, and I think you always you always wish you knew what the other side was.
Yeah.
But that wasn't an option. So yeah, our parents were really good at building us a family locally with friends that we would call aunts and uncles, and finding us grandparents we could adopt that would be key parts of our lives and that really filled in those roles as grandparents for us. So that was very special. And they were the ones that were chosen for us. We weren't just born into that family. Of course, we still had those grandparents as well, but it was really nice to know you were the one that they chose to have as their bonus grandchildren. And they treated us just like their other grandchildren, which was pretty amazing, amazing. And then all the friends just treated us as if we were their nieces as well, which was pretty special too.
Yeah. Dad knew how to make family.
Yeah, he was incredible at it. He was incredible at it.
Cool. So tell us more about your childhood.
So as a child, I was, 4.5 years younger than you? So it's a kind of a larger spread. So like when you were in high school, I was still in elementary. And so I know I always had a hard time adapting to change. I like things to be a certain way. And I remember when our elementary school closed, and that was after my second grade. And I think you'd just finished sixth grade.
Yep.
And we were going from our small town to a slightly larger town. And so I went from having 6 kids in my class to having 60.
64 in our entire kindergarten through 6th grade.
Yeah, 64. If you count the picture of our entire school, I think it had 64, including like the bus drivers, the cooks, the
teachers, everybody.
The janitors, the teachers, everyone. It was 64 people in that picture. And now I'm going to a class that size. And so that was hard. That was really hard for me to adapt at first, but one of the best things that ever happened, because I was able to expand the friendships, still friends with a lot of those people today. It also gave me opportunity to do things that weren't available for us in our small town. So I was able to play volleyball. I was able to be a cheerleader. I was able to play softball, all sorts of different
gymnastics.
Yep, I did gymnastics. I always wanted to do music, but unfortunately, I wanted to play the flute, and our parents couldn't afford the flute. So I did not play the flute. Instead, I was a cheerleader, and I could still be at the games. I just didn't get to be in the pep band, which is interesting because my husband is a huge musician, or was when he was younger, and our youngest one definitely got that talent from him because he is an avid musician now. So
in a weekend he teaches himself how to play another instrument. He's insane. A savant.
Yeah, it's crazy. But so that's a gift. I don't know how to read music. I don't know, but that was just because of the circumstances we were in. So you just pivot and you figure out a different way to make the best of what you have.
Yep, exactly.
In a nutshell, that was pretty much it. And I remember you sit there and you watch your kids nowadays as they're deciding that so many amazing opportunities for these kids, for colleges, for career opportunities. There are things that when we were in school, we were like, okay, what do you want to do? Here's where you can afford to go. Here's a program. I think that sounds good. And I went into the travel industry solely because I didn't know what else I would be good at, but I went into it because our dad's family, like we talked about, none of them lived near us, and they were in California. And I went into the travel so that I could make it possible for my mom and dad to travel out for him to see his family.
Cool.
And so I worked for Northwest World Vacations, which is part of Northwest Airlines, and they were able to use my travel passes and do standby to go out to California. And I know they were able to have a family reunion in, I think it was 94.
Yep.
And I think how many years had it been? 30, 35?
Long time. Mom had never met Uncle Joe.
Yeah. And that's crazy, right? That's Dad's oldest brother. Is that possible? They'd been married 30 some years at that point. Yeah. So I think it was about 30, between 30 and 35 years since they had all been together.
Yeah.
That was my initial reason for getting into travel. And then I just loved traveling. I love planning. I'm a huge planner. So I love being able to plan the trips. I loved being able to go anywhere on the spur of the moment too. With the travel benefits back in the 90s or late 80s, early 90s, we were able to fly for $20 anywhere we wanted. And one of my best friends and I in 1995 flew to Hawaii, standby, of course, but we were there for 8 days, did 2 islands, and our entire trip, including airfare, was $300.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And again, we worked in the travel industry. So we had the connections with the hotels. We were both in the product department at MLT Vacations, which is also part of Northwest World Vacations. So we had connections, and it was, even back then, it was all about who you knew.
Yeah,
right? I think
exactly.
today is so key about who you know.
Yeah.
But even back then, that networking was such a huge opportunity for you. We just didn't realize how important it was at the time.
Yeah, building those connections and nurturing. It's, I think, so going back to Daddy was really great at building family, and he was a master networker, even though he never attended networking meetings. He just he connected with everybody, and everybody loved him. And I tell people that I think that gift of connection is what he taught me most, was how to connect with people and how to build that trust. And it's not about getting to know people so that you can get something from them, which is a lot of people go into networking thinking, I'm going there because I'm going to build my sales. And when you go in with that mindset, you're not going to get that because you don't build that trust. But when you go in with, how can I help you? Then all of a sudden people want to help you. It's like reverse psychology, but you have to do it with integrity and be authentic. And so I love that. Now, networking, building those relationships afforded you some pretty amazing experiences.
Yeah. And it was just, I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to be able to do it as long as I was able to. I tried the leisure side of it and would book vacations for families. That was fun. And then I also got to do the corporate side and groups and meetings, which was also great because it's the planning, it's the scheduling, it's the working on all those little details to make sure that event or that meeting just goes off without any hiccups. So I love that aspect of it as well.
Nice. And I'm going to say one of the things, so we were talking about how Mom and Dad weren't able to afford for you to play the flute. And that was about the same time that I was trying to figure out what was I going to do when I graduate. And Dad always said, so for me, you're going to go to Votech. Because back then, girls didn't go to college as much as guys did.
Very true.
But Dad wanted to make sure that we both had some sort of education beyond the high school, and that we learned a trade so that we would be able to be self-sufficient if we chose. And he also, for me, Votech was cheap, right? Back then it was relatively cheap. And the benefit of Mom and Dad not having as much is that I got a lot of free money out of the deal.
For sure. Yep.
So my student loans were paid off in a couple of years, and I came out, because nowadays the debt that the kids, I know. But you got to go by that. So 4.5 years made a big difference by the time you graduated, because then you got to go to Wilmer.
Yep. I went to Wilmer Community College. So I got the 2-year degree, and then I was
in business. Was it in business?
It was in travel.
Was it? Okay.
It was a travel degree, but we didn't learn anything about travel, but that's okay. It was amazing that they had that degree, but I would say it was primarily business. It was it was business heavy. And then after that, friends of ours, high marks, were Their daughter had gone to the International Air Academy in St. Louis, Missouri. So that's where we learned about that. So I was lucky enough to get to go there.
Yeah.
And
I got to go to your graduation and pick you up, and we got to drive home in the car that had no air conditioning.
and no brakes. Yep, the brakes were out too. We had to downshift to get the car to slow down. But somehow we made it from St. Louis all the way back to the cities. So that was good. But yeah, that was a 3-month intensive course. And after that's what allowed me to get into or be hired by MLT and Northwest World Vacations.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And you also worked for AAA.
Yep, I did work, or I did the travel, or did the airline first, so like the wholesale side of it. Then I worked for AAA as a leisure agent, working with families and individuals.
Okay.
And then I went to Carlson Travel, and I was on the corporate side of that. And then I moved on to Carlson Meeting Management, which was the meetings and events.
Okay.
And then 9/11 happened. We had just found out from Carlson that they were moving our meeting management division to Arizona. That was at the end of August. And our last day of work scheduled with our department was September 12th.
Oh.
And so 9/11 happened the day before. And I will say the travel industry, if we hadn't dissolved when we did, it would have dissolved, because the travel industry as we knew it was never the same again.
Right. Exactly. And okay, what year was your oldest born?
Alex was in 2000.
Okay, so he was a year old at that point, and then Grant was the following year.
Grant was, 2002. Yep.
Yep. In the middle, you were forced to make a decision.
Yep. And that is when we decided, we talked about, okay, do I try to find another job now? Or we decided instead, let's just have our second baby and try for that. If it works out, great. And if not, then I can always go back to work. And I got pregnant with our second one, Grant. And I was lucky enough to be able to stay home with those boys for 14 years. So I was with them all the way through until Grant was in middle school. And then it was magical, right? But at the same time, it's hard being a stay-at-home mom. You just want adult interaction, right? I love my children to death, but you just also want to be able to talk to adults. So that's when we got involved with, or you helped me start the Women of Today in Eden Prairie, so that I would have an outlet to be able to. I love volunteering. I love giving back. And it was an outlet for me to be able to do that in my own community. And yeah, it was an amazing organization. I believe they still have a chapter here.
Yep. I think they do. And while you were in that organization, you did a big fundraising event?
Oh, I did it was their statewide event. And we collected blankets for Project Linus, which would deliver blankets to the children's hospitals and to children in need and just children for comfort. And I believe I think we had 10,000 blankets donated.
It was a lot.
And we had $15,000 that we donated to the organization.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm going to make a comment, and I'd like to get your take on it. Sometimes because people look at the lives that we've created, and some people have said to me, you can never imagine what I'm going through. And I think to myself, oh yeah. And listening to their story, I think to myself, oh, been there, done that. But you can't say that to someone, or sometimes I do. But I think growing up the way we did gave us some things that we wanted to bring with, and also gave us some things that we knew, never want to have to do that again. And you don't have to stay stuck in patterns that were created for you by your circumstances. You can actually make choices.
Yes, for sure. And is it maybe a little harder, or was it maybe a little harder for us? I don't know. We didn't know any different. And I think one thing our parents always did really good was to help us understand that we did have potential. And they didn't want us to stay back where they were. They wanted us to get out, and they wanted us to explore, and they wanted us to strive for better.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And whatever better might look like it might look different to you than it did to me, but they always wanted us to figure out what we wanted, what we were good at, and would try to help us to get there in the best way they could.
Right. Daddy used to always tell me, you can do, be, and have whatever you want. You just need to want it.
Yep.
And mom's, the mantra that sticks with me from mom's perspective is, just tell me I can't, and I'll prove you wrong.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So the combination of those two mindsets has allowed me to, it's like when I was working on the charter school, for example, and all these obstacles, I'm like, no, just tell me I can't. I'll show you a way I can. And I knew in my bones that was going to be a reality. So I just had to keep figuring out how to navigate. And
Yep.
so that just popped into my head about both of my mom and dad's mantras coming to life in that experience. Can you believe it's already been 20 years since that school opened?
I know, it's crazy.
I know.
I remember when you were doing that, and then you did the one out in Southwest.
Clarkfield. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Fun. All right. So talk a little about raising the boys, being a stay-at-home mom, raising the boys, because you've got two amazing children and they're both like so different.
Yes, they are. And yet so alike in so many ways as they're getting older.
Yeah.
Fascinating to watch them. Yeah, they were definitely different from each other, especially when they were young. And it's really, I would describe Alex, he's a little bit more introverted. He's very analytical. He's an engineer, if that explains anything, right? Like he's a facts guy. He did not want to take art classes because it's subjective and no one is going to decide his grade based on someone else's opinion. That's ridiculous. Is he good at art? He is. But he just was not going to relinquish his power to let someone else decide if they thought his artwork or any of the subjective type of classes was good enough. So that's him in a nutshell. And then you have Grant, who is an incredibly creative person. Also smart, good at math, whereas he always would undersell himself or be like, oh, I'm no good at math. You are really good at math. You just decided whatever for your mindset that when you were younger, I'm not good at math. But now he actually has admitted that he actually is really good at math, but very creative. So really took after what we had been raised with our mom. He sews and he does woodworking and he does metal and he draws and he's a musician, but yet then also incredible on the business side of things too. You have that. And then like we were saying with Alex, you've got an incredibly gifted with numbers but also very social with people, which is, that he had to learn that a little bit more because it would be just more comfortable, I would say, probably when he was younger, to not have to do that engagement part. But he did, and he does an incredible job at his work, being able to engage with people in addition to performing the tasks that are needed as well.
That's fun.
So when it was interesting looking back at like home videos, and like I said, Alex is a little bit more quiet now, but when we were watching home videos, he would not stop talking. He just went on and on. And I remember him going, oh my God, I can't believe that's me. Grant didn't have a chance to talk because all I did was talk. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty much true. But I don't know really when the change happened, but just slowly, he just became a little bit more reserved. Yeah, just a little more reserved.
He started modeling his dad a little more.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, having gotten to know your husband, the funny thing is, he comes across as this quieter sort of brainiac, but he has got some zingers and so much personality, and it's fun.
Yeah, I think Alex definitely models Kevin a lot, and I think Grant is like a mini me, right? Like he's got that spirited personality and that creative side and a little more drama, and the other ones are a little bit more in the middle level, and Grant and I can be up and we can be down. Yeah. I think that's how they've just how it shakes out. I think they also can fall in the middle, right? Alex can certainly have his highs and lows, but overall, I think he's just a little bit more just in the middle. And Grant has all the feelings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I think one of the things you did really well as a stay-at-home mom and as a parent is you have these two boys. They're only 2 years apart, and they're so unique. And I think part of the thing you gifted them was allowing them to be unique,
Mm-hmm.
to be individuals, rather than, I remember as a kid, I would always be compared to you. Mom would always say, Chrissy's so good at this. Can't you do blah, 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 whatever. And it was just like, yeah, but I'm not like that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't do cartwheels, things like that. And so I appreciated, because I raised my kids very differently as well. And so it's just, I think that's a really important nugget for people, that no two people are the same. And it's really important to allow people to be who they are and grow into who they're going to become, and knowing that's going to continue to evolve.
Yeah. I think the other thing that can be challenging is when you're seeing, for instance, my oldest one, who's really very smart, right? It just is, but not to label him as well, but you're the smart one and
Right.
you're the creative one, right? Like they're both incredibly smart and they're both incredibly creative. It's just where they chose to take that at different levels.
Yes.
But whatever they had wanted to do, we would have supported either one. There was no, you need to do this, or even when they went to college, the conversation was never, can you make a living doing that? Because if you love what you're doing, you'll make a living. And
Exactly.
So we're like, you want to do engineering? Great. Engineering it'll be. If you change your mind, great. We'll figure that out. With Grant doing outdoor product design and development. Awesome. Didn't even know that was a program. There are 2 in the country. And that's what you want to do? Great. Then
and
that's
he's amazing at it.
Yeah. And so just nurturing them within the limits of making sure it's what we can afford, and not setting them up for failure. If it was a school that you're like, yeah, try for that school, but you're not going to be able to help them with that, then don't set them up for thinking they have to go there. That's not their reality.
Exactly.
So just trying to make sure that we had those expectations out there and not dangling something in front of them that wasn't attainable, or that would put them in so much debt that they would never get out of it.
Exactly. I remember Alex was counting to 100, and poor Grant, I think he was like 3 or something. And you had something going on, so I got to take care of Grant, and I had to get him to preschool. And then I remember having that conversation, and he was so sad. Auntie Polly. And so while he was at preschool, I went to Barnes & Noble, and I found a coloring book with a connect the dots from 1 to 100. And I remember when he made the picture for me and colored it, he showed me, I can count to 100.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yep. He always wanted to, I really think Grant looks up to his brother. I think that's, you can see it in there. And I think Alex looks up to Grant. They see each other's, the strengths that each one of them shows. But I remember when Grant was trying to learn how to write his name, and we were outside and he wrote out Alex's name. And we're like, okay, Grant, why didn't you write out your name? And he goes, because I can't make the G yet. But he could do all the straight letters with Alex.
Nice.
And so
That's
he wasn't
pretty cool.
Yeah. So to be aware that I can't make that G. So if I can't make that G, I'm not writing that. Yep. And I think it was within a couple of weeks, he was able to make his G and he was able to write his name. But that was a really interesting perspective of, if I can't do it, I'm not going to try. So we worked really hard with both of them, seeing that, to remove that no, you always try, because the only failure is not trying. If you try and fail, you're just learning.
Exactly. And with the grands being 6 and 3, and the 6-year-old, so Henry every now and then, it's too hard. And Heather will be like, it's not too hard. Just try a little harder. and then you can do it. And he'd be like, but mom, and then come on, just give it one more try. And it's that persistence, that tenacity that I think helps build those muscles that are needed to navigate the future.
Yep, for sure. And the willing to try.
Yep.
And again, maybe you'll try and you won't succeed, and that's okay. But what did you learn from it? And then try again.
Yep. Okay, so now when Grant was little, he was diagnosed with some interesting medical circumstances. And I have always been in awe that you were able to navigate the system to figure out how to get what he needed to live a fulfilling life. And challenging, I know, but watching you navigate, I can't tell you how many times I've told Heather, you need to reach out to your aunt because she knows how to do this stuff. And I remember when mom made you the power of attorney, the medical power of attorney, and someone said, does that bother you? And I'm like, no, I hate paperwork and my sister is great with it.
Yeah, that was first you go through a little shock and awe. So basically he has a metabolic bone condition, very rare, 1 in 25,000 people have it. Spontaneous case, no one else has it. So early on, didn't know anything about it. This is in the early 2000s that he was diagnosed at. He was 2 years old, 2004 or 2005. So the internet, if you think about it, was still in its really infancy stage.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot of information out there, but just continuing to look online, trying to find different avenues, finding different doctors, figuring out what kind of doctor you need to see. And then as years have gone by, the medicine, or there's been clinical trials, new drugs are out. They do now have one. He was having to take medicine 4 times a day, which is really hard to have an elementary or a middle school child have to take pills 4 times a day. No, and he's just not going to do it. He's going to hide them. He's going to throw them away. He's going to do, because you'd have to do them in the middle of school. He's not doing it because he does not want to be different. And having to do that makes him different. So I think it's going to be 7 years now, they came out with a new medicine that is biologic, injectable. So early on, he had to have it once every 2 weeks. Now he gets it once a month. But once it cleared approval, or got through all the clinical trials, got approved by the FDA, he was the first one on it at the Mayo Clinic, and he was the 4th one approved on it in the country.
And
yeah, so
it's been great.
Yeah, because we were fighting against time. He was, probably 15. He was a little delayed in growth, which was so his growth plates were still open. My husband and I were probably a little bit later bloomers, which for Grant was exactly what he needed because it kept his growth plates open. So as soon as I'd heard it had been approved, I was on that phone to get him on that medicine to try to get any benefit we could for the amount of time we could. So he was 5 foot, between 5 feet and 5'1", and he is now 5'8.5", and he grew that in 2 years.
Because I remember we were at the Science Museum and he was standing next to me and I said, "You've grown." And he said, "No, I haven't." And I said, "Yes, you have." And I showed him where he was. Then every time I would see him and he would come up to me to see if he'd grown.
Oh,
and
yep.
I will never forget the day that I looked at him and I, "You are now taller than me." And he's, "No, I am." He was so excited. It was really cool.
Yep. So that was, that would be one of the later things we've done. And now, it becomes as much as it is a part of him, it was a part of me. And so that's probably when one of my biggest struggles, if you will, is learning how to let him navigate that himself. He's 22, so he's pretty much taken it over, but I still find myself going, have you ordered your medicine? Have you done this? Just gentle reminders, because like I said before, I'll let my kids fail, but I don't want him to fail on his medical.
Right.
But we have to come to the point where I just need to trust and let go.
Yep.
That's hard.
It is.
And then that changes my identity.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that, I think that's important also for people to think about is as we evolve and grow with life, each of these phases or seasons of life, there's a release, like a going into the fall of that season. And we have to then, it's like grieving the loss of what was, so that we can then shed that layer or let the leaves fall, so that then we can come into spring.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then you get to bloom in a whole new way.
Yep. And you get to figure out just who am I when I am not the caretaker.
That's right. Yep.
I get to just be his mom.
Yep. Exactly. And you have to figure out, what does that look like?
Yep.
Right? Because being a mom for that 2-year-old where he needed the advocate because he couldn't, versus being the mom for that 22-year-old who says, I got this. And then the first time he doesn't, he'll be like, oh, mom's in my head.
Mhm.
And then you can say, okay, now my job here is done.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. Did you fix it? Okay, we're good. We're good.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So as your kids grew, you went back to work.
Mhm.
And I remember, because this is one of those changing your identity. You'd been a stay-at-home mom, you'd done all this volunteer work you had given, and I remember you reaching out to me and saying, I want to go back to work, but how do I do that? Because I don't, and I, these aren't the exact words, but it was something to the, I don't have the skills, or I don't have any skills, or I've been a stay-at-home mom, I can't do anything. And do you remember what we did?
I know we did mapping it out and showing all the different things that how volunteering and tell me all the roles you've held at, within these organizations, and um, the value that all of these things, that just because they're not monetary doesn't mean they aren't skills, and it doesn't mean they're not valuable.
Exactly. Yeah, because you'd gone to school for this thing, and all the skills from those travel industry and event planning and all that stuff that you had done, even though you hadn't done those paid jobs, you had continued and you built on those skills. Your mom skills and all the navigating the medical system and all that stuff, very marketable. The Project Linus and all that you did for that organization, that's completely transferable. And so, how did that feel, going through that process and coming out the other side with something that you were really amazing at and loved?
I have a tendency to sell myself short. I can see the value in everyone else, and when it comes for self-reflection, I struggle with that. Not gonna lie. I think a lot of people do.
I'm going to challenge you for a second. I don't know that you struggle with self reflection. I think you reflect, but I think you struggle with giving yourself the credit
Okay, yep.
for your amazingness.
Okay, yes, that sounds more like it. So when you're actually putting your resume out there, and I will say the one job, I had a couple of them, when I went back to work initially, I went back to the church we were part of, and a great community, but they allowed me to work. It was, you know what, we will hire you for whatever hours you want. So you can still be home when the kids get there. You can work 3 days a week. It was basically a job that was a great entry job back into the market because of the flexibility, but still learning and enhancing all of the skills, kind of getting back into actually doing the tasks in a work environment.
Yeah.
And on the timelines and being with other people. And your job is, the next person can't do their job if your job isn't done. So that accountability was really good. And then I moved on to, I was a volunteer coordinator for a nonprofit agency. It was great. It was amazing, and was able to, I've always volunteered. So I know I had a unique perspective, because not only was I the one trying to bring the volunteers in, I knew what the volunteers wanted. And I knew if it were me, this is what I would expect. And so it was able to really provide an experience for them that maybe someone that hadn't done the level of volunteering might not have been able to see it from those eyes.
Mm-hmm.
and then to be able to grow the volunteer program. And that was great. And then we had COVID, and that agency still to this point, they don't bring volunteers really back in. Everything shifted. One of the things we did was community meals, and ever since COVID, they don't come together for that community. Or for those meals. They've tried to bring the people back in, and everyone has shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had to let me go because there just wasn't the job as it was before. That job just doesn't exist anymore at that location.
Okay, so before we go on to what you're doing now,
Mhm.
I just had an awareness.
Mhm.
It's every 20 years, the universe or major
Mhm.
global impact causes you to lose what you were doing so that you can become something new. 9/11
Yeah.
and COVID
And then COVID, yeah, it's about 20 years apart. Mhm.
and it aligns with your trajectory and changes in how you're living. Okay, so you pivoted and now you have a really fun business that brings some of the, so we've already shared how playing house, business, school, all those things we did, how you've brought them to life. And now that love of cooking and creativity that mom and dad gave us, you have turned into a cottage industry business.
Yes. So I have my own business. It's called Sassafras, and I do custom sugar cookies. I make them for different people, for their events, for corporations, pretty much any event I can do custom cookies. But one of the things I do love doing is teaching other people. And I think that comes from like just as we were growing up, we were teachers. And when you're volunteering and you're leading organizations, you are a teacher. And I love doing these cookies so much. And I know that I wanted to take these classes. That's how I learned. I did an online class. And I'm like, if I want to do this, I know there's others out there that want to do this. Even if it's like my intent was to make cookies for Christmas with my boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to do that plus a lot more. So I would say I launched my classes, it'll be a year ago in May, and those have probably been taking off more than even the custom cookies.
Nice.
And I just today launched my spring classes, are all up on my website. And one of the classes, I sent out an email to some past participants in St. Peter, Minnesota. There's a brewery down there that hosts some, and just said, hey, guys, heads up. I'm going to be launching this live later on. It's on my website right now if you want to grab seats. And they sold out the class.
Nice.
So we had to add a second class because I didn't have anything for the brewery to sell. I must be doing something right. They keep coming back. And so for many of them, this is their third class.
Nice. That's cool. And I got to be one of the test sites. How about that?
Yes.
We had 8 people, I think, around my kitchen table.
Yep, to try. And so I could figure out, okay, this is what I like. This is time-wise. This is never going to work. What people's skill sets would be at. How do you push them out of their comfort zone, but not so far that they feel that they're not successful, and trying to gauge, just because you want everyone to be successful. You want them to walk away being proud of what they made.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remind them that it doesn't matter what they look like. They're all going to taste the exact same. So give yourself some grace, especially if it's one of your first classes. It takes time. This did not just happen overnight. It took me, I'll be 2 years now doing it. And it's taken so long to get to the level I'm at. But I love it. And every cookie set I do, I learn something new and I get better at a technique so that the next cookie set is going to be even better. And so that's my hope for the people that keep coming back, that they get that experience, but then they love coming with their girlfriends. Or I have several guys that have taken us. I've had a father-daughter. I've had
You had my neighbor father-daughter team.
Yes, I had them too. I've had like just solo guys come. I've had husband and wife date night. So it's not just girls, but it's just a great social avenue for people to go do something fun.
Exactly. And I was just, as you were saying that, I was just thinking back to that day in May where the Grands and my daughter and my son-in-law and my husband and your kids were around the table. And so 3 girls and 5 guys eating cookies in honor of our mom for the party. And so, yeah, everybody can do it. And it's a lot of fun. Very cool.
Yeah, it's been a really fun trying to grow it at a speed that's sustainable and comfortable. Right. But still stretching myself or still challenging myself for growth.
Well, and I think it makes a lot of sense because you're bringing in the skills that we were raised.
Yeah.
But so it makes a lot of sense. The networking, the craftiness, the teaching, all of that stuff that mom and dad, and that ties back kind of full circle to the beginning where it was the 4 of us. Yeah. And we had to find ways to have fun. And if dad had the opportunity to go to college, he would have been an engineer because remember he designed farm implement equipment and made it, and just all these different things. As you were telling the story about your kids and stuff, I'm like, ooh, they got a lot of Papa Cliff in them.
They really do. They have so much, like you've got the engineering part, like with Alex, and then you've got the fishing part with Grant, man.
Yeah, it's
fishing.
Pretty cool.
But also that creative. Dad was so creative.
Yeah. And so was mom. And also their grandpa Kokal, very creative.
Yeah, he was an art teacher and amazing artist.
And grandma, brilliant with math and all the things. So they're a good mix of a lot of, it's very cool.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I think I was blessed with an amazing family. I'm very lucky.
I think you were. All right. If you were to go back in time with all the wisdom that you have at this age and share a bit of wisdom with that younger Crystal, what would you say? What would you tell yourself? I was going to say with that younger Chrissy, because that's what we called you when you were little.
Called me Chrissy. I think I would tell her that, you know what, because when we were little, you didn't know there was a world outside of what we had. And that,
outside of cornfields and beans?
Like, seriously. And that, you know what, just because you're from this town doesn't define you. And you get to define you, and you get to constantly change. And just because you decided this is what, you decide you're going to do this, or you think others want you to do this, if you try something and it's not what gives you joy, try something else. And if you love what you're doing, and if you can, if it's on the path you should really be at, you're going to make it work. And you're going to be successful financially, you're going to be successful internally, you're going to be happy. But that to always take those risks and not define yourself basically from where we grew up. It's a big world out there with a lot of opportunities if you want them.
That's right. Unlimited possibilities.
Yes, there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So if anyone wants to follow you or connect with you, how would they do that?
I have a website. It is Sassafras Cookies. So SASYFRASCOKIES. So sassafrascookies.com. I am also on Facebook and Instagram, and it would just be at Sassafras Cookies.
Perfect. And I'll have the links in the show notes so that people will be able to get you. Nice. Great. Yeah. Anything else that you want to share before we part ways?
No, but just thanks for being my big sis.
Of course. Yes. Thanks for putting up with me. Yeah. I love you.
And I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud of what you've done. I'm very proud of everything that you are becoming and how you are growing this business. It's amazing.
Thank you. How am I supposed to close when I'm going to cry again? I guess full circle, right?
Yep. There you go.
All right. So listeners, if you've enjoyed this show and learned a little bit, please like it, share it, subscribe, and leave us a comment so that I know what more you'd like to learn. Until next time, enjoy living into your best life and take each day knowing that you can pivot and you can move closer and closer to that life you desire. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Polyskaya, your show host for Live Into Your Best Life. Check out the show notes and visit her at polyskaya.com to learn more and continue your journey. Until next week, enjoy the adventure.